create trust with your stakeholders. Very obviously, there's a tension between sort of very careful governance and regulation and agility. And that tension can never be perfectly resolved. You always are going to struggle with that. I mean, even in my startup, one of the things that we have to do to have corporate customers is we need security, compliance, and audit stuff that we just can't avoid. In a regulated environment where governance is really important, there's this trade-off or balance around the concept of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, VUCA. That's that acronym. The basic idea is that when you are working in a volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous environment, yes, you need structure, but you also need flexibility. And the key thing that you're trying to do is to create trust with your stakeholders. So, of course, you want adaptability, you want feedback loops, you want the ability to change quickly because of the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But you have to do that in a way that builds trust rather than breaks trust. And that's tough. So key things: transparency. So the creation of a visible product backlog that's got some prioritization to it. The idea that within the sprints, the team creates transparency around what it's working on. But even more fundamentally is the importance of the sprint review. At the end of every sprint, regardless of what you've actually accomplished compared to your goals, you still show it off. You make it transparent. What is your progress? What are your challenges in terms of the product or deliverables or services that you're trying to create? That transparency and the speed at which you are transparent, right? Like a couple weeks or even a single week for a sprint length, the speed of transparency is essential specifically for knowledge work, where oftentimes it's really hidden. It's all in people's heads, or it's in documentation that no one has the time to read. So that's the other side of the coin, is that, yeah, of course, with governance, you do have to do some documentation, but to build trust, you need that transparency. And 400-page documents don't create transparency. They just don't. They actually create obfuscation. um, they create traceability rather than transparency, and that's also important, right? A lot of governance is about traceability. So then when you build on that foundation of the sprint reviews, then what that does is it gives you, as a team and as an organization, the ability to be highly responsive to feedback. And that's the second part of building trust. So when you're responsive to feedback, when a stakeholder says, you know what, this is wrong, or you know what, I just thought of something that's really important that we haven't talked about before, or you know what, this is awesome, can we build on this? Whatever the feedback is, when you're able to integrate that in and deliver a response to that feedback in just a couple weeks, all of a sudden your stakeholders are like, wow, this is awesome. We can actually get what we need. We can actually get what we want, instead of discovering, a year later or months later, oh crap, totally wrong direction. This was wasted effort. Those are really the foundations. And I also just want to mention very quickly that, of course, improving quality and improving performance are also important, but they come usually after you develop that transparency and that responsiveness to feedback. Now, this diagram here, specifically this tug of war, is really about where as an organization, or sometimes even on a per team basis, you need to make some trade-off decisions, right? And so how much control do we need versus being able to respond to the volatility that might exist in our environment, right? How much predictability can we really get and desire versus the true uncertainty of our environment? Likewise, how much can we make things as formulas or repeatable processes versus things that are complex and just really need to be figured out as we go? And then finally, how much stuff can we clearly define versus what's going to be ambiguous? In every kind of project or product or service work, there is some balance between here. There are some things that can be clearly defined that you might put in a formal specification or requirements document. And then there's other things where there's going to be ambiguity, and you can only figure those things out by actually trying stuff. You can't create a specification in advance. And so understanding how to balance those things in an organization is where you try and discover what are the agile techniques, what are the agile methods, what are the aspects of the mindset that we need, but always to start with and rest on, these two key principles of transparency and responsiveness to feedback. And you can build from there.